I'd like to start with a few introductions. My name is Susan Westa. I am the senior planner with the Windham Regional Commission, and I have been leading this project. We also have Chris Campany, our executive director, on the call today. He just gave you a wave. I'd also like to introduce our team of technical experts, and we have Alex Kelly from Rural Innovation Strategies today, and also Carol Monroe from ValleyNet. And following their presentation of the business plan, we will have the Deerfield Valley Communications Union District team, and we have the leaders from that group here today. We have the chair, Ann Manwaring from Wilmington. We have Stephen John, the vice chair from Marlboro, and also David Jones from Halifax, the clerk. And for those of you who have not been following this project all along, you may want to know that we received this grant to do this project from the state Broadband Innovation Grant in 2019 in December. And the overall goal of the project is to provide internet services to all the unserved and underserved folks in the region. The COVID pandemic, of course, has only increased the awareness of the importance of this issue and the need for connecting all folks to the internet for education, for their businesses, for healthcare. And so we had a kickoff meeting in January in person, back when we could do that. We had a survey training in February, and we had a very successful survey thanks to our volunteers. And all that information was incorporated into a feasibility study, which was completed in June. And since that time, our team has been working on the business plan. We're all here to learn about today. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Alex Kelly.
Well, thanks everyone. And I just wanted to also note that Becca with Rural Innovation Strategies is also here, and she'll be helping with this presentation. Yes. So to kick us all off, I just wanted to say thank you again to the Windham Regional Commission. Thanks to the CUD leadership for helping us immensely through this process. And we're looking forward to outlining the findings from the business plan for you. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Carol, who's going to kick us off.
I think we all should learn sign language. And that way when we're mute, we can all get it. Thank you very much. I think this has been a learning process in many ways for all of us. The environment has been changing rapidly when it comes to broadband. Not just with the COVID-19, but with all different kinds of technology coming out, as well as all different kinds of opportunities in terms of funding. So it has been a really great process, and I'm glad we've gotten to this point. The business plan clearly shows that Deerfield Valley CUD is a path for the Deerfield Valley CUD, to launch and oversee a fiber to the premise network in the Windham region. I mean, that was pretty clear throughout the study. And it holds true for almost all scenarios as we looked at the business planning. The network is achievable with the 15 towns that are currently in the CUD. But adding additional towns would be beneficial. Adds to the aggregation of demand and makes it a much stronger network as you move forward. So there's always room for that. They can execute on this business plan and all the scenarios, make it very positive scenarios. But the only exception to that would be if the FCC Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, RDOF, so you'll hear us use the word RDOF a lot, elects to build those areas that are available for that FCC auction. And they're not willing to go with the CUD. In that scenario, it's unlikely, but in that scenario, it would be the CUD would need to merge with another CUD or extend their network or look at other opportunities for funding. We're assuming a VEDA loan from Vermont Economic Development Loan that they've made available to CUDs in $4 million range, and 12 million 9 to 14.2 million in subordinated debt for construction in the early years. And we identified the subordinate debt, but in fact, if there are other opportunities coming in from the federal government or less costly equity financing or even individual investment, that would bring that number down. Next slide.
Hey, Carol. Carol,
Yeah?
it's Chris, just real quick. I think some folk are not muted. If you may just want to remind them, there's you throw your cursor to the bottom of the screen. There's a microphone icon to the far left. Click that. If you don't see a red line through it, that means you're unmuted. I mean that you're not muted. Click it so you see a red line through it, and then you'll know you're muted. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. So we incorporated some new data into the business plan that changed from the feasibility study. The first of that data was that we have higher take rates than in the feasibility study. We're incorporating those new take rates for the COVID-19 subscriptions, not just for EC, but called rural broadband initiatives. Everyone is experiencing an increase in subscriptions, and so we expect that that will hold going forward, particularly as school systems and businesses are now fully aware that the process of using this kind of a technology is a possibility. And so I think you'll see a whole lot less snow days going forward, and a lot more businesses willing to have their employees work from home. And so that subscription rate we expect will continue. We also are experiencing increased construction and material costs. Those increases are pretty significant. Some of them are COVID related, factory closures or working at reduced capacity. And then of course, tariffs on Chinese goods. But more importantly, as we move forward, we know that there's an increased demand for broadband. And there's funding opportunities to do that, not just at the state level, but and the federal level. But there are more equity partners who are interested in moving broadband forward. That increased demand generally means an increased cost in materials and goods. So due to those higher construction costs, the amount of subordinated debt needed to be increased for this plan, and that the opportunity to go out for revenue bonds has moved from year 4 to year 5. But that's
slowing you down,
increased
and you sick instead of speeding you up and making.
This is somebody else who hasn't muted.
It may have been someone who just joined us. I just muted them.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So as we move on, for all of you that don't know what the FCC Rural Digital Opportunity Fund is, it's an auction of unserved areas across the country by census block and census block groups. It's called a reverse auction because you start at a high value that you're willing to pay, you're willing to build for, and then it goes down to whatever the most inexpensive build cost would be for those that are participating. There are a number of census blocks and census block groups in this territory, and what we don't know is how this auction will unfold. The actual reverse auction begins at the end of October, usually will run for about three to 4 weeks, possibly longer if we can't get to an end result. but after that, we'll have a lot more information. So we've looked at this from a business plan perspective to build two scenarios, sort of the best and the worst scenarios. The first one would be if the RDOF census blocks that are in the RDOF census blocks are in play. That means that the RDOF winner will build fiber to the premise, and it will partner with Deerfield Valley CUD. Or if the RDOF winner is only planning to build improved DSL or wireless, we think these technologies don't offer adequate speeds or reliability for many consumers, and they're not universal. These blocks can still be considered unserved. The result of that is the Deerfield Valley CUD can just follow the business plan as usual in that scenario. The second scenario would be if the RDOF census blocks are not in play. And what this means is the RDOF winner builds fiber to the premise or cable and does not partner with Deerfield Valley CUD. It's an unlikely scenario, but you never know what's going to happen. And because of the rules surrounding this auction, you can't speak with anybody, so you don't know what anybody's going to do in this field. You don't know what the incumbent carrier will do, cable companies, some other ISP type of companies from out of state. All of those are at play, and we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But in that scenario, the RDOF winner will meet the coverage requirements, can better meet the coverage requirements by partnering. But if they do not want to partner with Deerfield Valley CUD, then those census blocks are no longer unserved. Those would be considered served. In that scenario, then the CUD would need to grow or find much better financing options or grants. So as I mentioned at the beginning, there have been lots of changes in this environment in the last 3 months, and one of them is this CARES funding, and at the state of Vermont got from the federal government. And they created this Vermont Connectivity Initiative with $12 million of that funding. It's been distributed in 3 funding rounds to different ISPs across the state, and even some from out of state who have come into Vermont and decided to expand. And so the most recent round was announced this week. And if you go to the Department of Public Service website, under press releases, you can see all 3 rounds as to who was funded and for how much money. But the money has gone to a variety of types of technologies across the state. So there's some wireless locations, VTEL wireless locations. There's some other wireless types of technologies. And then the cable companies have also received some funding. And a company from Maine, Tilson, received funding. I believe it's to build St. Johnsbury. So you can see it's sort of across the board, but in our area, as of round 2, we know that there are a number of locations that are under the VTEL wireless section. And then there are some that would be receiving cable extensions. We're not too concerned about the cable extensions. They're usually in areas of town in which cable already exists. And so this is just a partial extension up perhaps a lane or a dirt road or to a home that wasn't, that they couldn't justify before, but they can with a subsidy of this type. The 575 locations receiving VTEL wireless, we're somewhat concerned about that, but not to the point of not building a fiber to the premise network. As we all know, VTEL wireless in the past and even going forward, any of these wireless technologies are not universal access. So that means that, a premise might be able to receive it and the one next door maybe not. So it's not something that we're overly concerned about, but that's up to round 2. I didn't see anything on the list in round 3 at this point in time to be concerned about, but I haven't really looked closely at it. It just came out. So these, what these initiatives will do is remove premises from the unserved category and make them served. And in some cases, it's really that's a good thing, right? I mean, that's what we're all here for, is to make sure that people can be served by broadband and have a significant broadband connection to their home that's affordable, but also reliable. And that's where these stand right now. And if there are more of these, we should be cautious of how much, how many unserved areas are still left for the CUD to serve. But we'll monitor that going forward, and I think that it will we'll make sure that we know what those are, and you always need to be cognizant of your competitive services out there. And
so I think
always
Becca's
wanna
going to
think
take
about-
over. Oh wait, sorry, this is
Okay.
you. No, I forgot.
I was thinking this is my last slide, but
This is your last slide, Carol. Sorry.
that's okay. To mitigate some of that risk, one of the thought processes we had was that you could go forward with something called an operational partnership, which would be, instead of merging an actual merger with another CUD, you would just coordinate all the operations with another CUD. It becomes more attractive for potential operators that way, but in a larger footprint. And if they have to build a service office in the region, then it makes sense that they would want to serve as many households or towns as possible in so doing. A bigger district is also a bigger footprint for operations or for construction. It makes it sort of easier to fundraise in that economies of scale, taking advantage of economies of scale, and of course improving the margins. Shared staff in a merged CUD can represent up to $700,000 in savings if you were building your own operations network. And if you can, in many cases, you can share hub sites and backhaul. And those two are quite, backhaul in particular is quite an expensive item. And so if it can be shared amongst CUDs, then I think that there's some price breaks there as well. So it makes sense to do that. The downside to that is that there, through the Vermont Economic Development Corporation, there is $4 million loans to CUDs available. And so if the upside is if you keep them separate, you might have two. And the downside is if you merge them together, you might only be eligible for one. That remains to be seen. I used the word backhaul. Somebody wanted to know what that means. That's the connection from the central hub at the CUD to the internet. And that's usually to the internet in Boston, New York, or Montreal, Albany, those locations, before it actually sort of spreads out over the rest of the internet. That backhaul from the CUD to that location with a carrier for web internet access can be expensive, and you want it to be powerful enough to, of course, serve all of your customers. And so, not unusual. I think EC Fiber is now dealing with close to 17 gig of backhaul. It keeps going up. So based on the number of customers you have, it's good to share that if you can. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rebecca. Rebecca, we'll pick up here on sequence of work.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I also just wanted to say is for the idea of having an operational partnership, there are kind of three scenarios. There's the CUD is completely independent, they're completely merged, or they're partnering with another CUD. So if they're completely merged with another CUD, in that case, you would definitely only get one VEDA loan. An operational partnership, the CUDs might be able to work together in a way where they're separate enough that they each get their own VEDA loan. So that remains to be seen. That kind of partnership might be more complicated, so there's definitely pros and cons. But generally, just thinking about ways to increase scale, which then increases margins typically. So onto the sequence of work, which is a section in the business plan. the very first thing you do is you collect data on the utility poles and apply to be on them. So you'll need to issue a request for proposal for pole data collection, which I believe the CUD is already working on. The next thing you'll want to do is put out an RFP for a big RFP for design, construction, and operations. And we'll talk about this in the next slide, but basically different companies do different parts of the process. So they will either bid on part or whole the entire thing. So you will sort out who is doing each step of the process kind of at the beginning. The next thing to do is called make ready, which means you're making the utility poles ready to put a new attachment on them. So you might have to move some wires around, and actually the pole owner, who's usually Green Mountain Power, has to actually move the wires. So you need to apply to be on the pole. Green Mountain Power has to actually move the wires, and then you're ready to start construction. So that's one bottleneck in the broadband deployment process. And kind of explain some of the timeline also, because make ready can take a long time. Typically DMP has been able to do for a CUD about 250 miles a year. So after you put out your RFP for design, construction, operations, you will start designing and engineering your network on a very detailed pole by pole basis. Then you also during this time have to decide where you want to put your hub locations. So you'll have a hub in each town, and then you'll have two more central hubs that connect to the broader internet with backhaul in two locations. So you have to decide on the town hubs and the central hubs. And these locations need a generator access typically, or it's ideal for them to have that. So you'll often put them next to, say, a fire station. They can be outdoors. It's outdoor equipment, and then they can use the generator from the fire station. So then you design your network, then you construct it, you put fiber on the poles, you put all the electronics that you need on it. After that, you're gonna do a pre-subscription campaign where you ask people, do you wanna sign up? And if they say yes, then you will do the drops and installation. So drops is when you connect the fiber from the utility pole to the house, and installation refers to all the work inside the house to set up the router and such. So there's a lot of steps in here, but this is a basic flow chart. So this is a list of potential partners or vendors. All of these companies have presented to the CUD vendor committee, and there are some that presented that aren't on this slide, but basically there's kind of three main phases: design and engineering, construction, and operation. So you'll put an RFP out at the beginning and see who signs up to do what. If you put everything out at the beginning, we'll also encourage companies to come together with a joint RFP to give you a more complete solution. So for example, GWI does design, engineering, and operations, but they could say, we'll project manage the construction and Eustis Cable will be our constructor. And so GWI and Eustis could come together and put together a proposal for you. So, yeah, so I would also encourage everyone to go look at the meeting notes from the vendor committee, because there's a lot of really good information on there. It's also in the business plan. Because there are some really great companies that came and presented to you all.
Yeah. Great, thanks. So I'm going to close out the presentation, and we're going to talk a little bit about the timeline now for building in various towns and timeline for getting the construction going. And I know this is a particularly it's a topic that's of interest to everyone, right? When is the service going to be built out? And so I want to be clear that this business plan gives you a definitive path towards building all of these towns, and that's really great. That's not something that the region has had before. It's a business plan that will allow you to fundraise and take you all the way through to building all the unserved areas, but it's not going to happen overnight, and there are certain towns that are going to unfortunately have to get built before others. So this is the build sequence that we assume in the business plan. It's optimized to build the unserved areas first, and then after that go into towns with greater densities. So this build sequence is not necessarily set in stone, but we are using it as illustrative because it will largely happen in this order. Whether it's, Whitingham before Halifax or even Marlborough before Reedsboro, I suppose there's some there's an ability to move things around, but that should be dictated by the design and engineering of the network. So this build sequence, as I mentioned, assumes that you're building to unserved areas first and avoiding cabled areas as much as possible. You can overbuild cable areas, and that should occur strategically. So you should build cabled areas where the demand is highest, where the density is highest, and always, again, paying attention to who your competitors are, who's already in the area, and where can you get the best return on your investment. So at each step of the construction each year, you should sit back and say, okay, should we move ahead with our planned build? Where should we build next? Where do we see demand? And this sequence might change, and you absolutely should reassess at every juncture, what the context is on the ground, and let that dictate your build sequence. So, the other thing that could change your build sequence is that Green Mountain Power is moving poles around the state from easements into the right-of-way. They have a number of areas. They're going to do that in Windham. So just make sure you're maintaining close contact with them. And if they say, oh, we're going to move these poles later this year, you may delay construction of a certain stretch until after they move the poles so that you don't have to build twice. So this is another illustrative timeline, and a lot of these terms, have been mentioned before. Becca mentioned some of these. So this page is meant to answer the question, when can we start hooking people up? So pole collection, which is the first step, I know you've already started with that, or if not, you are very close to starting. That could take up to 3 months for the whole district, right? You need people to actually go to every single pole and document a number of things about that pole, what's on it, where it is, take a picture of it, and stuff like that. The pole application and make-ready work then could take about 6 months. So we would assume that'll happen in spring and summer of next year. The design and engineering can also be done at this time. It's not necessarily recommended to begin the pole applications and make ready before the results of the RDOF are known as well, because again, that's the big juncture coming up that might change the way you decide to construct the network or the composition of the network. So then construction, right, could take 6 months. So we anticipate that happening end of the summer in 2021, the fall of 2021, and then there's a pause for winter. If it's a mild winter, who knows, maybe they can get farther in 2021, but likely the construction will extend into 2022 of the first kind of batch of the network, which means that customer installations and drops can start happening in spring and summer of 2022. I think the business plan is a much more detailed document than this presentation. We tried to hit the hit an overview and the high level aspects of the business plan. And so, please do look at the full document, use that as your guide for the network and for building out and for the next few months. But I'll just kind of go over some of the next steps that we know you're going to have to take here. This is just an overview. As was mentioned, there's the recommendation that you continue to welcome new towns into the CUD. Right now you're at 15 towns, and it will make for a more viable and less risky project to add more towns. Securing VEDA funding, right? The business plan is meant to allow you to apply for that $4 million loan. So that should be one of the next things you work on. Poll data collection we've mentioned a few times, as well as you're going to need to continue to vet your potential vendors and partners, and then issue an RFP to find the ones that you want to work with. We know that you are preparing for the RDOF auction in conjunction with Tilson, so I assume that will take up a fair amount of time and thought in the next month. Once you have operator selected and vendors, you can begin the pre-subscription campaign, because at that point you'll be able to work with your operator to know exactly what the price points are. And that pre-subscription campaign, again, allows you to understand who's ready to sign up for service right away when it's available, which can allow you to both be more efficient in your construction, because you can do, you can do a drop survey while you're actually building past the house. But it will also allow you to understand where demand is. And so you can kind of build certain neighborhoods along your way, prioritize to where people are ready to sign up. And then, of course, the other element is raising subordinated debt. Again, the business plan goes into a little more detail about that, but that will allow you to really accelerate the build in the early years, and gain a critical mass of customers in the first 3 years. So thank you all for that. I think I'm going to pass it off to the Deerfield Valley CUD leadership.
Alex, I have a question here actually in the chat box for you guys.
Great.
And that is, if an RDOF winner provides partial average to a census block, is that census block considered served?
Sorry, can you say that again? I can't see the chat box because I'm screen sharing.
Okay, right. That would make sense, Carol. Do you want to address that?
The RDOF winner, so the question is, the RDOF winner provides partial coverage to a census block. Is the census block considered served? Yes and no. I mean, the requirements of RDOF are that you have to provide service to the unserved locations within that census block. Not the census block group, which is a much bigger footprint, but the census block itself. So it would depend how many unserved locations are there today, and how many other locations are there in that block. So we can look at them on an individual basis and determine that. But they're required to provide service to all unserved locations in the block, and generally speaking, many of them will be unserved in that one census block, meaning it's not likely that there's only one in the census block that's unserved and 120 that are not. But I think we should look at it individually and make those decisions as we go.
Thank you. And that's the only question that I have right now. So I think, yes, we should turn it over to the Deerfield Valley CUD folks.
Before we do, could I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
This is Hector Galbraith of Dummerston. It's a question about questions. If we have questions as we go along, do we ask them there and then, or do we sit on them to the end of the presentation?
So I had asked that folks submit them in the chat box, but if you have one right now, you can ask it.
Sure, I don't know. Well, I'll keep it till we get to the end.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. And folks can speak up at the end as well. And so who is is Stephen or Ann going to speak next?
I'm just going to say a quick word, and then I'm going to let Stephen talk about all the work that we've been able to do with the Windham Regional and the team. I just want to thank you all for being here today. This has been quite a learning experience for us. We really appreciate all of the work that we've gotten and the support we've gotten from Windham Regional. And basically, Stephen has been our liaison with Windham Regional for this project. So I'll let Stephen go and talk about how this is working out for us.
Thank you, Ann. Yeah, thank you, Ann. I'm the vice chair of the DV CUD. So I took up the weekly meetings and with the team, and we went back and forth on the things we needed to know and how we could make the business plan more effective for you, the general public, people of other towns who are not members of the DVCUD certainly should be considering the merits of joining in this endeavor. And I'm serving as liaison in that capacity too. So if any of you are curious about following up, the way you work at that generally is through your select board. The statutes establishing CUD membership provide for towns to join CUDs by vote of their select board at a duly warned meeting, regular select board meeting. And once they pass such a resolution, appoint a representative and, if possible, 2 alternate representatives so that the town is always well represented at the governing board meetings of the full membership of the DVCUD. This is the same for any other CUD as well. And I'm more than willing to appear at those meetings and, take any questions, also provide any information that your board, your select board, or other citizens may be curious about. The WRC is a great website for reviewing the feasibility study and the business plan. That's the purpose of this meeting tonight, to review and to receive questions. But there also is a dvfiber.org website that provides information about the progress to date, including all our previous board meetings and minutes and agendas. So what have we accomplished to date? We haven't built a single thing, I'm disappointed to report. On the other hand, there's good reason why we were wise not to do so. And this really is the time when towns that are not members of the CUD do consider very carefully the opportunity to join at this point, because as you can see from the business plan, there are reasons for us to be optimistic about proceeding, and there also would be would benefit from greater support if there were other towns that joined in this effort. There's no tax obligation or liability to any town that joins. Any indebtedness that the CUD undertakes is repaid by the revenue stream from the subscribers, from the customers, and that's usually a pretty small amount, but it does add up over time, and this would obviously require long-term financing in the neighborhood of 10, 20 years. So that's what really most people are concerned about. Well, if I'm going to get involved with this, what's it going to do to my taxes? So just to reassure you, that is established by statute, that the citizens, taxpayers of any town are protected from any liability, including the event of bankruptcy by any endeavor, any undertaking that the CUD takes. If you want to read the law carefully, there's the way that those assets would be, distributed, and then the CUD would no longer exist. We hopefully that won't happen, but I just want to make sure that people know what the end obligations are for any town that chooses to join in this effort. I think beyond that, we are at the stage of just beginning to issue RFPs and hiring a consultant and proceeding based on, especially the end of October, what the RDOF tells us, what partners we may or may not have to deal with. So this is a really great time for towns that aren't members to reassess the situation. With that, I think I'll leave it open to questions. You probably have many. I know Mr. Galbraith has one for sure, but there are probably others. Thank you.
Well, I may as well ask my question since you've given me a prompt. Steve. Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm from Dummerston.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, I'm thinking here about timing of when a town like Dummerston can expect to see, well, I've got two questions really. But first of all, timing, when a town like Dummerston could expect to see some progress on providing those of us in the broadband desert here with some sort of broadband, because although Dummerston is reputed to have 65% cableized, there are still big parts of Dummerston that have zero broadband. But
Right.
Dummerston is not in the initial list of towns. And from my reading of the business plan, it's not selected to be in the initial list of towns that are going to be worked on.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm very glad you asked that. So that's a critical issue for a lot of the towns attending this meeting tonight. The business plan had to be based on something that we knew. And all that we know at this point is there are 15 towns that are willing to commit to this endeavor in terms of the coverage area. Now, originally, the Windham Regional Commission's big grant, Broadband Innovation Grant, was to cover the entire Windham Regional Commission area. And that is in the feasibility study, where in fact, I think all correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, but I think all the towns were listed in that feasibility study.
Yeah.
No, that's correct.
Yes, and so this doesn't mean that now we have this in crowd and this out crowd necessarily, but I was just trying to emphasize the critical time period now that we're in, because if you're a member town, you have one vote just like all the rest of the towns that are already members in terms of the planning and decisions about investment, right?
Yeah.
If you're not at the table, obviously there's no way I, as a representative from Marlboro, can commit something from the citizens of Dummerston.
Yeah,
right?
go ahead.
Yeah. So you know, I'm glad you raised the question. That is what I hope. I hope one of the results of this meeting tonight and this webinar is that stirs up a little bit of conversation in each town about, well, look, you know, the private companies haven't been serving us very well up to now. At least they haven't gotten to my house. So, you know, is this a better prospect? And then I would refer you to the business plan. But this business plan with those towns listed in a tier basis, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, there's no limit. Well, there is a limit, but this plan can be accelerated greatly by what do you think? Money. You know, if there's more grant money available, we're not talking about going to taxes. I'm just saying if there's more grant money available to support rural development, then we obviously can accelerate this business plan, just as there are 8 other, maybe perhaps 9 CUDs in the state. This is a statewide venture in terms of the legislature giving the opportunity for towns to band together, to collaborate. And it's all by volunteer citizens at this point in terms of our board work and our committee work and all that. We don't intend, although it could change depending on what towns join and how votes go at our board meetings, we don't intend to have any employees at all. We're not starting a new business in that way. All the work will have to be contracted by vendors who have the experience and ability to do the work. So that's a key difference that I think should give any towns considering joining a better picture of how we'll proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. The second question, thank you very much. That makes things a lot clearer, I think. The second question I had was someone talked earlier about a VEDA loan. Do we have any idea how big that VEDA loan might be?
Oh, it's limited to 4 million at this point per CUD.
Yeah.
So it really is not sufficient. You know, it's by no means sufficient to accomplish the task at hand for all the towns. That is just the beginning of, at least that's some money that we know we could secure before having a revenue stream. Just to give you an idea, I don't know about Dummerston, but in Marlboro we have 60 miles and there's nobody claiming to have very good service. We don't have any cable, but anyway, that would be, you know, in previous RFPs when we went out in the private sector on our own as a town to try to do something on our own, it was going to be in the neighborhood of $3 million. So, you know, that's you can see the business plan for these 15 towns is depending on the size of the town and so forth, you know, pretty much in line with that kind of estimated total cost. And the question is, what amount of money do the private companies, the partners we might entice or invite, be willing to put in? And then at what level of control does the CUD maintain in terms of
that was my follow-up question. Are we going to get the providers to pony up some money so that they can get into the game? Although we would lose some autonomy. Yeah, well, that's it. And that's the balance. I mean, if you've gone on the website, you know that the DVCUD has a vision and principles. And one of the principles is that we provide net neutrality, and we guarantee people's privacy, and we have competitive rates, and that we have good service. You know, there's no reason to do this if. Well, I guess there is reason to do it if you're satisfied with the present service because you want competition. But I think for most of us, we've been waiting 10, 20, whatever years, and it's not happening. And there's a reason for that. We don't provide in our rural towns a sufficient margin of profit to make the investment worthwhile for the private sector. So unless the public sector can work out a partnership, which is a win-win for both sides, it's not going to happen. No. But money will make it happen faster for Dummerston or any other town that happens to be on board. But you are an area that is more covered by cable than some other towns. Vernon and Guilford have already joined, along with Brattleboro. Brattleboro is probably the most cabled town of any. But those three towns certainly have seen the merit, as Wilmington and Dover have, even though they have cable in town, of providing for everyone, which is still not the case in even our most heavily cabled town of Brattleboro. Yeah. Thank you very much, Steve.
You're welcome. And good to hear from you. I know Dummerston has some places that are pretty hurting. And
yeah, I just got a quote from Comcast, I think it was. I asked them how much it would cost us to cableize the mile or so of street we were on, and they told us $28K. Yeah. And I just about dropped my dentures when I heard that, because no one in my street is going to pony up $28K. It's just totally. They don't care about. They talk a lot about the last mile, but they don't really care because there's no money in the last mile.
That's right. And that's why the legislature passed this statute to establish CUDs, because they saw this from the model that Carol Monroe knows quite well, a member of our consulting team from EC Fiber, but ValleyNet up there in the North White River Junction area, north of there. They've been at this for 10, 12 years, I think, something like that. And they've incrementally built up from a few small towns. And now I think are at 27 members or something like that. And they have 6 more coming that they're going to build. They have taken this incremental approach, which is very frustrating for those of us that have joined the CUD who all want to get to the table first.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Welcome. Others?
Yeah. Munson, do you have a question?
I do. My question really is about, I understand the idea of how to do this, but of course I'm in Vernon and we're well served, and we also have very good connected ability. And I'm wondering if it was ever thought about in this, that geographically might be more efficacious than need. In other words, we can be a center. We don't need a whole lot right now, but we have connectivity to Guilford, and then to Halifax, and then on that. So I wonder if it's the idea of just the most needs is actually effective.
No, I can assure you that's not, not necessarily the case. We do have a vendor committee. Actually, I should just share with all of you, we have 3 major committees that are doing the work on a volunteer basis now. One is the vendor committee that has interviewed all these vendors that you saw reported on in the business plan, but also is doing the kinds of work on mapping and researching what is the most efficient or effective way to proceed. Now, we don't pretend to be experienced enough to know all the skills necessary to make that decision strategically, Munson, but that certainly is really the venue of certainly responsibility of the vendor committee as we proceed to make recommendations to the full board. And the vendor committee meets once a week, at least. And then the other committee is a finance committee, finance and audit committee. And they're working on the development of the financial resources to sustain whatever plan we undertake. And then the third one is the communications committee, and that's the committee that's going to build the website, the new website, to hold us together and communicate with everybody, newsletters and so forth. So those are the kinds of committees that people. Representatives that are appointed by the towns and their alternates certainly have been stepping forward on. And I know we have Brana there from Guilford, who's from Vernon, who's on the communications committee, and
Right.
She's doing some great copy editing for the guy.
She's rough.
Yeah, it's really great. What's really rewarding about this, I'm going to share a personal, what's really rewarding about this work is that we're meeting all these people in towns that we wouldn't know otherwise. I mean, Mr. Galbraith, I wouldn't have known you existed if you hadn't come tonight. So, and we're all, cast of characters, basically, as typical of Vermont. And we have different skills and different attributes that we bring to the table. And, we're much stronger for that kind of rich interplay and connection. And I think that we will prevail to meet our goal of connecting everyone in southern Vermont, at least as far west as Stamford. And we
all I'm asking is that I've been working on this for about probably 8 years or 9 years in Vernon, to almost no avail. But I just want to make sure that our model is not locked into a kind of idea that may or may not slow it down by trying to get the last guy first.
Yeah.
Did I make a comment here? Thanks, Stephen. Just while the organization itself is established around towns joining, when we get to the engineering process and start going down a road of a row of telephone poles to hang our fiber, those poles don't know when you've crossed into another town.
Agreed.
So the reality is, while Halifax is a much less well-served town overall than Vernon is, there are roads that are going to take us, I don't know if they go to Vernon, but they're certainly going to take us on into Guilford and into West Brattleboro and places like that. So when we start getting into the engineering parts of this, the point that I think you're trying to make does come into play.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Any more questions? You can unmute yourself if you have one. No? Well, I guess that's about it then.
Well, I'll just follow up. I'll try to put
Thank
I'll try to put in the chat. I'll put my email address and phone number if any towns want to get a hold of me. And the way it works is after that vote by your select board, your representative comes to the next board meeting, and you ask for being admitted and joining the group. And we're, thus far, we're unanimously approving everybody. And I think the only thing that may change over time, 2-3 years from now, or sometime in the future, when there is a fixed plan of construction and incremental design and implementation, and the borrowing and financing has been all calculated to work out on a funding stream, then towns that come later may have to be considered strategically. When is the timing to join, and when does it work best for construction and finance? Keep that in mind. You have to be realistic about this, moving forward. Munson?
Yeah, just a quick question about the possibility of a cross-border from into Massachusetts and stuff, because there are a lot of places there that need it. And would that be something we should pursue, or should we run like crazy away from it?
Well, it'd be interesting to mention that, because we have considered Whip City. There are some vendors there that have served the towns very well. Monroe, we know, is served very well. And there are other towns. My impression is that Massachusetts has done much better in financing and supporting the rural connectivity.
They have that 40%.
Stephen, I can speak to that, because I have a lot of contact with City Fiber and a number of towns. 20 towns in Massachusetts that border Vermont, including Coleraine, Rowe, Heath, and others, are being built right now by Whip City Fiber, which is a division of Westfield Gas and Electric. They received substantial funding from the state of Massachusetts. In addition, Massachusetts towns are allowed to float a bond and add it to their tax rolls, which we're not allowed to do in Vermont. So by the end of 2021, all of our Massachusetts, small town Massachusetts neighbors, at least 20 towns that border or adjacent to Vermont, will have fiber. Several of them are already lit.
So maybe you can confirm that, Munson, with the people you know, and see what the prospects are down there south of the border. It is hard to work things out across the border in terms of the legislation that's established our opportunity.
Carol?
Just that the legislation doesn't prohibit you from serving across the border.
Right, because you do one of the well, I don't know if it does. Does the CUD, does EC Fiber serve somebody in New Hampshire?
No, ValleyNet does, but ValleyNet serves Lyme, but the legislation specifically doesn't prohibit that from happening.
Well, I might add, the legislation did not require that the whole town be involved necessarily either. They didn't, they accepted that certainly parts of towns were well served, like Dummerston was, like Mr. Galbraith was saying in Dummerston. And then other parts are, the desert. And so that was really the rationale that Guilford took in joining the CUD. They know they have neighborhoods and roads adjoining Halifax and Marlborough that have people who aren't being served at all. Or any better than copper will provide at this point. The copper lines are pretty universal due to telephone connection.
Do we know if Massachusetts prohibits coming the other way? In other words,
no. Only electricity and landline telephones are regulated utilities, which are subject to certain territories. Whip City Fiber, which, as I said earlier, is in Westfield, Massachusetts, would be very happy to operate in Vermont. There are no federal or state restrictions to bring broadband across state lines. It's strictly a business decision.
And we're anticipating we would hope that they would respond to an RFP that we would issue.
That's what I was asking. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have another question in the chat box. And that is, can you address the elephant in the room, Starlink? I have seen the pros and cons, but would like to hear your view.
Well, I might leave this to technical expertise.
Carol?
But, well, I did teach physics and all that. So, the pro is that if you get enough satellites up there at a low orbit, it'll reduce the latency, that is the delay that comes back, which your present HughesNet suffers from, which is out at a much higher orbit. But the question that my Marlboro neighbors and I have about my own property is, how many trees do I have to cut down? And, where do I put the dish? We don't have, I don't have a clear idea of that. There is online available some details, and people can also beta test or sign up for a beta test. And there are members of our board who are really assiduously pursuing this question. But thus far, we don't see that as being something that people can bank on at this point. But, people have questioned Elon Musk before, and he's succeeded eventually, usually not living up to his time limits, time predictions. But
I think Elon Musk is going to get to Mars a lot more quickly than he's going to get broadband to us. The other thing to think about, though, is that anyone who's ever had cable satellite TV knows that every time it rains, the whole thing crashes down. If that happens when you're in the middle of a long email, that could be very infuriating. I don't see satellite as being a viable contender.
Okay, well, Ann wanted to say something, but I just want to say that this is exactly the kind of issue that our vendor committee has to consider. We have to consider all the options and which ones are pursued. We have to date come consistently on the same conclusion as our business plan, that fiber, symmetrical service down and up for the foreseeable future with a limited potential of bandwidth is worth the investment to do it right.
Agreed.
Ann, did you want to add?
Well, I just wanted to just to pick up a little bit of what you just said, which is that fiber and the commitment of the fiber that we're working on in the CUD is to roll out 100 up and 100 down. That is very fast. And we can also, within that, make available higher speeds for example, some businesses that might want to join along the line. And fiber has been often called future-proof. The little glass strands are never going to go away. Some of the technology and hardware to start it down the glass strands and go back the other way, that may change over time. But it is a very, very stable platform to work from, more so than Starlight ever will be, than VTEL ever will be, or any of the other technologies that go out over the airwaves like that.
Yeah, and I just add that the business plan, in case you want to share this with your friends and neighbors, the business plan does, summarize the advantages and disadvantages. These are various technological approaches to meeting the need we see.
Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to, so for folk who don't know, when back, when we first applied for this, what was it, December, Sue? And then we got the grant in January.
We got the grant in December. At the end of December, we applied November, I believe.
So, the CUD did not even exist at that point. So I just want to commend them for, they self-organized, they pulled themselves together, and have done just a tremendous job, doing a lot in a very short period of time. And had they already come together, it would have been more natural for them to apply for the Broadband Innovation Grant rather than WRC. But I think we worked really well in partnership with each other. So we'll be basically handing over this effort to the CUD, but we're happy to help, especially connecting the CUD with towns, helping communication with towns, especially those that aren't members. So we're not going to abandon this by any means, but just wanted to really commend the CUD for the amazing work they've done. I hope they appreciate what they've done, because it really is, pretty extraordinary to stand up what they did in a relatively short period of months. And I also want to thank our other our technical experts. I don't think we could have done this. It's actually ValleyNet and Rizzy who put in the initial letter of interest. And so to some extent, we kind of piggybacked on them. We asked if they would be willing to partner with the regional commission, and they've been great partners through this. They've been very patient and understanding. Working with across 27 different towns on any project is not a piece of cake, but they've done great work, and especially kind of just helped work pretty smoothly as the CUD kind of stood itself up and really ultimately became the beneficiary of the business plan. Really, the business plan, it's not the business, even though it was done under a grant with the Windham Regional Commission, is really done for the CUD. So appreciate everybody who was involved. I'm thrilled to have had this happen, and that we actually, all the vehicles are in place now to try to implement it as best we can. So congratulations, everybody. This is a momentous occasion.
Thank you, Chris.
I'd just like to throw in a thank you to Anne, who has been extraordinary in this, and hope she will continue to guide us through this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, but I definitely could not do it without the leadership team of Stephen John and David Jones, and our other two chairs, Zan Estes and Tom Almeida. We've kind of taken on the leadership and the various committee heads, and could not have done it without them. They're terrific, all of them. I've enjoyed it.
Great. Stephen.
Now all we need is a few more people.
A few more towns to join us.
Some money.
besides the money, and of course, the more towns, the more people that are pushing this, the better chances there are for increased funding. But don't forget the importance of every individual in each of our little towns or big cities to be connected, and how important it is to have that option. They don't have to get connected. But I know in terms of my town, we want to see every tax parcel be able to be connected to the internet, and the advantages in terms of health, education, and economic development that provides. So spread the word.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
My phone number and contact information are on the chat. Check it out.
Silvernet is misspelled.
Oh, well.
Uh-oh.
My bad.
You can always contact me, too.
Yeah, well, you can try. That's a new company, I guess, Munson. I don't know. Yeah, get that straight.
Are they bidding?
Well, we'll welcome any bidders, right? Okay.
That's right.
Thanks so much, folks.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.